Welcome to Muslims and Mental Health with Sister Heather, a groundbreaking program looking at mental health issues through the biopsychosocial spiritual paradigm.
Welcome to another edition of Muslims and Mental Health. Today we're going to be looking at community psychology and the American Muslim community, and specifically a program called the American Learning Institute for Muslims. I will be joined by guest Ustadh Ubaydallah Evans today. I want to first give you a little idea about Ustadh Ubaydallah. He is ALIM's first scholar in residence. He converted to Islam while in high school. Upon conversion, Ustadh Ubaydallah began studying some of the foundational books of Islam under the private tutelage of local scholars while simultaneously pursuing a degree in journalism from Columbia. Since then, he has studied at Chicagoland's Institute of Islamic Education, IIE, in Tarim, Yemen, and Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt, where he is the first African American to graduate from its Sharia program. Ustadh Ubaydallah also instructs with Ta'leef. So please join me in welcoming Ustadh Ubaydallah Evans. Welcome to our program.
Thank you for having me, mashallah. This is such an honor. It's my first time participating in a program of this type, so I'm excited and a little anxious, but inshallah, I hope that it goes well.
Inshallah. So I want to start out by asking you what the ALIM program is and why it started, and what does ALIM mean apart from the acronym American Learning Institute for Muslims? Is there another meaning behind that use of the word ALIM? So I know that's a lot at one time, but that's where I want to start with.
To my understanding, the ALIM program started in Ann Arbor, Michigan, almost about 25 years ago, from what I understand. About a little over 20 years ago, there was a group of students that were studying with Dr. Sherman Jackson, and they were studying with him at the University of Michigan, and they wanted to know of his availability to do some community kind of based programming. And a group of students approached him, and he gave them kind of a conditional yes. He said, I'll do it on the condition that you guys will organize everything, get everything together. And from what I understand, he thought that this would effectively, stifle their enthusiasm to put the course together. But to his surprise, they came back and said, okay, everything is together. The only thing we need you to do is to come and teach. He did that, and I believe this was kind of the genesis of ALIM. And maybe a couple of years after that, it culminated in a summer program, and we've been doing that, every year since then. Now, the name ALIM in and of itself is really a slick acronym, American Learning Institute for Muslims. And I think it's fitting because we do educational programming. But it is somewhat misleading in that we don't aim to produce ulama. We don't aim to produce people that would be identified as alims, as it were. Rather, it is to help Muslims from various walks of life gain a working familiarity and literacy with their tradition so that they can be productive members of their community, contributing in myriad ways. So yes, we deal with Islamic knowledge, so I guess the name ALIM is fitting, but the name ALIM can be somewhat misleading because we don't aspire to produce ulama.
So for the non-Arab speaking viewer, what does ALIM so we're saying that that's an Arabic word, right? And
Right.
What does that mean in English? And if you could also define ulama, because I think there are probably a lot of people that may not know what that is either.
So the word alim in Arabic literally means a knower of anything. You can be an alim of anything, a knower of anything. But in context, the word alim is usually applied to religious scholars. It's usually applied to religious scholars and generally applied to scholars. The word ulama is simply the plural of alim.
Okay.
So alim is a knower or In context, a scholar, the word ulama, knowers or scholars.
And so I've often heard an association with the ALIM program, the terms Islamic literacy. And would you say that's more accurately what you're trying to convey with the program?
That is exactly what we're trying to convey. You seem as though you know something about this.
So, could you expand a little bit on Islamic literacy and what that means to you? What is trying to be conveyed with that understanding?
Well, Islam is Islam. On the one hand, Islam is very simple. In fact, I remember being a young kind of aspirant, thinking of converting to Islam, and what attracted me to Islam was this simplicity of its kind of fundamental tenets in La ilaha illallah, that there's nothing worthy of worship besides Allah, wa Muhammadur Rasulullah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. And I remember struggling as a high school student, trying to understand Christology. And so in that vein, Islam is very simple. But the tradition that Islam produced over many centuries is not exactly simple. It's not, I think it would be inaccurate to characterize it as complicated, but it's dense. And so by Islamic literacy, we're just trying to acquaint people with some of the key terms, key movements, key disciplines, important books, important, just giving them some of the discursive tools so that when people are talking about Islam publicly, they can contribute their voices, but to have those voices rooted in, something of the Islamic tradition, as it were. So by Islamic literacy, a real practical example, in our community, as you saw me just a moment ago, there's a tendency to toss around Arabic words, right? They can't bring forth one kitab with any dalil about rububiyyah of the Rabb al-Alameen. That's all I'm saying. Okay, you understand nobody understands what you're saying. And it's like that with so many other terms, especially terms that relate to discourse. So fiqh. What is fiqh?
Right.
The fuqaha. Who are the fuqaha? Aqidah. What is aqidah? The turath. What is the turath? So just helping people to be acquainted with, okay, this is a broad impressionistic understanding of what Islam is, so that when these issues are being discussed publicly, I can contribute my voice and do so with confidence. That's what I think we mean by Islamic literacy.
Okay, great. And so I want to ask you as well, who's involved with ALIM, and how do you feel that ALIM addresses the present issues for American Muslims, and where is it currently located?
Well, the people involved with ALIM, you have the core faculty of ALIM, which consists of Dr. Sherman Jackson, Dr. Munir Fareed, and Dr. Ali Suleiman Ali. I'm active now as scholar in residence, a humbling and embarrassing at times honor. And then you have the Board of Trustees. They're kind of scattered throughout the country. And then the beneficiaries of ALIM are also scattered throughout the country. And ALIM really doesn't have a brick and mortar location, but the summer program for the last, many years has been held in Livonia, Michigan at Madonna University. This year it's going to be held in Flint, but we do satellite programming throughout the country. I'm involved with a lot of that programming. So ALIM is not really your brick and mortar, it's more of your click and mortar in terms of where you can find ALIM.
Okay. And so also, how do you feel that ALIM addresses the present issues for American Muslims?
I think ALIM has its hand on the pulse of the issues affecting American Muslims most deeply, because you have all of these different I would call them almost symptoms of this one major disease, which is there's a crisis of authority in American Islam. Who really speaks for Islam? And I think we're witnessing the displacement of the traditionally trained ulama in that regard, people that tout degrees from institutions like Al-Azhar, where I graduated, Medina University or Islamic University at Medina, and Qarawiyyin and these places. They, mashallah, I think that they're still allowed a voice, but they certainly don't have a monopoly on what is taken or accepted as a normative Islamic understanding. On the other hand, mashallah, we've produced a number of highly qualified academicians who don't really have the community's trust. So we're kind of in limbo. We're kind of like, these people, the community doesn't completely trust these, and it doesn't completely trust these. And what we're finding is that anyone that can write and publish kind of has a voice, essentially. And I think what ALIM does is ALIM says, okay, if we're going to democratize learning, publishing, the dissemination of thought, let's be sure that everyone sitting around the table understands the terms of engagement and is able to engage intelligently. And this is what we mean by making sure that everyone is literate. And hopefully, in doing so, those that really possess even a modicum of expertise, their expertise will be demonstrated. Because something I believe wholeheartedly is that part of the reason why it's easy for people to discredit traditionally trained ulama, sometimes it's easy for them to discredit academics, is because they themselves don't have any knowledge of the tradition. So to them, this is all a bunch of mumbo jumbo. But if they themselves are just familiarized with these disciplines, the great care that went into preserving them, and the great discipline it takes to acquire a fair degree of mastery in them, maybe this will result in the people that should be respected being respected. So I think ALIM, speaks directly to that issue. Everything else, in my estimation, in terms of what we're dealing with intellectually, there's a whole nother subset of issues that we're dealing with spiritually and emotionally, and even psychologically. But in terms of what we're dealing with intellectually, I think that's the core issue, and everything else is just kind of an outgrowth, some of them quite mutated, of that core issue.
So it sounds like it's really meant to empower the individual through their own learning process.
Totally. Again, you sound as though you know something about this, man.
So I want to ask you, what are the current initiatives of ALIM? And I'll start with that. What are the current initiatives of ALIM?
Well, our anchor program is the ALIM Summer Program. That's coming up after Ramadan this year. In addition to the summer program, we've been doing quarterly programming, so spring program, winter program. In addition to those, we have the satellite programming that I mentioned maybe 5 or 10 minutes ago. I do a lot of that programming myself. Different communities, mashallah, we get a chance to work with lots of student communities, which are some of my favorites. They ask unapologetically, which is always interesting for me. And then we're about to launch this Tier 2, which will be kind of doubling down on the people involved in the satellite programming. At current, the core faculty of ALIM, these are all people that are very busy. I myself, I'm working kind of as scholar in residence. I have limitations. I have a wife that loves me dearly. So there's only a certain amount that I'm able to go out. So hopefully Tier 2 will give our efforts a really nice multiplier effect, where that ALIM pedagogical style and technique will reach more people, inshallah. And then we're trying to, at current, we're trying to kind of beef up, if you will, our online presence and our social media presence. Struggling with that, partly because I'm a Luddite, but inshallah, I'll get over my irrational fears and start to engage, inshallah.
Inshallah. Okay, so at this time, I need to take a break for our sponsor, and we'll be right back.
Inshallah.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona Del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
Welcome back to another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. Today we're discussing community psychology, looking at American Muslims. Particularly, we're looking at the American Learning Institute for Muslims. As we begin to approach Ramadan, we're profiling a few different organizations for your consideration. And today I'm joined with Ustadh Ubaydallah Evans. Welcome back. And I'd like to start by asking you, what do you see as being the main issues for American Muslims today and why?
Well, I mentioned kind of the authority crisis. That's kind of a central issue, but some of those other secondary and tertiary issues, I think, are number one, the disaffection with faith that many of our youth are experiencing, and I think it's just it's almost the inevitable consequence of living lives that are only devotionally connected to Islam. So if you live in a secular society, meaning, there's nothing about your everyday lived experience other than your devotional activity that connects you to Allah. No art, no architecture, no visual art. That's what I'm pointing at. No other, the kind of culture, the kind of how might I say it?
It sounds like you're talking about cultural production.
Cultural production and just the kind of, sensory. I mean this in a very sensorial way. Meaning, if I'm in Egypt, it might not look the best. And I lived in Egypt for a very long time. Shout out to all my Masriyun out there. And a Masri bi kulli fakhr. So I can say this. It might, things might be shabby, things might be run down, but just going out onto the street, I'm reminded of the presence of Islam. I'm reminded of certain key and core things about my religion. Even inadvertently, it might not even be something that's done purposely, but it's around you. In the US, in Europe, Western Europe especially, you really don't have the presence of anything like that. Then, the education, a lot of the paradigms that, we're being educated upon are secular and sometimes outright atheistic paradigms. So religion becomes less than just a personal commitment. It becomes almost an unnecessary, incidental aspect of just my personality. And Islam, I think, requires a level of commitment and engagement that just won't cut it. That just simply isn't enough. If this is the tenuous relationship you have with Islam, that, it's just this incidental part of my historical background, how then do you expect a person to kind of get up the steam to pray and to live as a Muslim is commanded to live, And many of the youth are really, really experiencing that. And those that were born into second and third generation immigrant families, they don't even have that kind of hard wiring from back home that maybe will kick in. It just isn't there. I think that is a major, major issue. Then I think, the disaffection of women with the Muslim community. Quite frankly, many women just feel as though they've had enough. And I think that they're beginning to seek alternatives to the traditional Muslim community. Be that, female-only prayer spaces, be that what now are referred to as the third space model. I think all of these are potentially good, but they all signify a failure on our behalf to take their grievances seriously and really make sure that they feel like honored members of our community. And I think that if we don't address those issues, we serve as a community to really lose mightily, in my estimation. That's a major issue. And then I think dealing with the issue of Islamophobia, not really so much an issue for me personally, because I guess I'm accustomed to being a fifth column in America, and sometimes it's four. I mean, not that I'm exulting in that or enjoying that or celebrating that, but African Americans have been forced to create an all-American lane from without the mainstream. So this is very comfortable space for me. Nothing that Rush Limbaugh is doing it makes me uncomfortable. This is very comfortable space for me. But I recognize that for a Muslim community searching for its identity, struggling against this kind of American nativism, to actually have some backbone, be a community of principle, say what needs to be said, be a community of mission while trying to allay the fears of your neighbors that you don't want to blow them up is a struggle. Is a struggle. And I think that our goal is to find a way to do that. It won't happen through crass apologetics, crass pragmatics. At the same time, we do want to be wise in highlighting what we have in common, with our neighbors. And hopefully all of this will give us the kind of platform necessary to be a community of principle in America. I mean, we don't want to be an alienated community, but our goal isn't to be a domesticated community either.
So that leads me into my next question, which is, how do you see the efforts of ALIM affecting the future of both the American community and or the communities abroad?
Well, I think that ALIM has a model that and I'm biased, obviously, but when I first encountered ALIM, I encountered ALIM as kind of a traditional seminarian. I was studying at a madrasa, and it's amazing. Madrasa has almost become a bad word. It's like, you went to a madrasa? But I was a student. I was a full-time residential student at a madrasa.
Which means?
Excuse me?
Madrasa, which means?
School.
Thank
an
you.
Islamic boarding school. I was studying law, and I was memorizing the Quran. And this is kind of the mode that I was in when I first encountered ALIM. And I knew that ALIM was different from anything to which I was accustomed immediately, because everything else was really about the preservation of the tradition. And usually it was the preservation of a highly romanticized notion of what the tradition even was. And ALIM was the first place that took a look at the tradition for what it actually was. Now, it just so happens that as Muslims that have studied the tradition, they found much redeemable, they found much admirable about the tradition, but they didn't feel the need to sugarcoat everything about the Islamic tradition that made us uncomfortable. And in doing so, they kind of gave us a license, number one, to feel that, this idea of Islam being equated with perpetual warfare against non-Muslims does make me uncomfortable. Like that is something that does make me uncomfortable. And to have somebody look back at how those doctrines were formulated and why they aren't particularly relevant in this day and time, or why they at the very least aren't, they don't express the full range of Muslim political engagement. It was like, oh man, what a relief. And I can keep my integrity. So it wasn't just like, oh, let's explain all of this away and this is all bad. At the same time, it wasn't, let's just read this, memorize this, and preserve it, whether or not it has any real operational, functional, or applicable relevance. And I think that equipping the Muslim community with the latter, as opposed to the former, kind of just the mode of preservation, I think it serves to benefit us because it will unleash, I think, the kind of creativity, the kind of purposeful thinking that the American Muslim community will need to engage in to make this deen, and by extension, the tradition, something real that serves us. And I think that ALIM is unique in its ability to do that. So we're trying to empower the American Muslim community to, think collectively to solve some of its issues.
And so what do you think is often missed about the people who attend ALIM and its relevance?
What's often missed is that not all of them are college students. The vast majority of them tend to be college students, but not all of them are college students. And there is a misconception about ALIM that it's not spiritual. Now, spirituality as a word, I don't even know what that is. I mean, personally, it's like, is it spirit? When people talk about spirituality, it's like they're referring to this, numinous awe that you feel, spiritual. And so when people say ALIM isn't spiritual, I take exception to that. I think for me, gaining some clarity about my faith, gaining some clarity about the tradition upon which my understanding of my faith was built was deeply spiritual for me. And I think that coming to terms with that in a way that, again, allowed me to preserve my integrity, but also gave me license to think, actually provided a space in which real spiritual growth could take place. Everything else is kind of these, deferential bows to a tradition that you scarcely even believe in, that you are afraid to even understand. And one believes that spirituality can come through that. I would beg to differ. I think that a lot of acting and a lot of posturing can come through that. But spirituality, I think, requires, first and foremost, one to come to terms with themselves and what they actually believe in. And I think that ALIM is very unique in its ability to help people come to terms with those things. And that, in my estimation, is a very deep and profound expression of spirituality.
So what can be done now to make a positive contribution to ALIM itself in this kind of work?
Well, first and foremost, we need people to make lots of dua, for this effort. I believe fervently in the power of dua. And so this is something that, last I checked, even though it seems like everything is being monetized in our society, I'm waiting for, it won't surprise me when dua is monetized. Somebody says, to make dua, you got to pay. But last I checked, it's still free. Like little else, at least in Chicago. You can't even park your car, like little else. But dua is still free. And we really need people to make dua for us. If beyond making dua, people can make financial contributions to ALIM, that really matters. This really matters. Sometimes, people overlook the actual cost of putting on programs like this, of putting together institutions and organizations of this sort. These things do cost. And we want people to get involved in terms of donation at any level that they can. It all counts. If you're able to give as a monthly donor, any amount from 10,000 to 5,000 to 1,000 to 500 to 100, all the way down to $10 or $20. This is this helps us tremendously. If a person is able to give a one-time donation, if they were to do so, we promise we would not actually use the donation or deposit the check until Ramadan, and you'll get, manifold increase for everything that you're giving from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And beyond that, we just need people to spread the word about the work that ALIM is doing. Sometimes it shocks me that given how prolific Dr. Jackson is and how important the work he's doing is, and given how unique Dr. Fareed is, and given how wise Sheikh Ali is, and given how crazy I am, I'm surprised that ALIM is not more well known. Some people actually come to me and say, ALIM, are they still around? Are they still doing stuff? And I think part of that is that, yes, we haven't engaged in some of the self-promotion that other institutions have engaged in. And I'm not criticizing those institutions. I mean, I see it as them highlighting the good work that they're doing so that they can receive more support for that good work. And we actually need to do more of the same. But we've exercised some restraint in that regard. But we don't want to be overlooked as an organization for the work that we're doing, the work that we aspire to do. So put the word out there. And, I'm from Chicago, which is close to Missouri, the show me state. The only thing I can say is that if people have questions about ALIM's programming and its efficacy, just check us out. Just come to anything that we do on the weekends. If you can, make it out to the summer program. And I think the benefit of what ALIM provides will be discernible.
And so where can people make donations?
You can go on alimprogram.org, and if they really want to make a donation, I'll give them my phone number. You can give them my phone number.
Oh, well, no.
Yeah, really want to make a donation. But alimprogram.org is probably a good place to make their donations, make their contributions.
And so if someone would like to get involved with ALIM, are there other opportunities outside of the donations for them? Like, are there volunteer opportunities or
yes,
some other
always, volunteer opportunities, and perhaps most importantly, inviting ALIM to your community, for a weekend program, maybe even hosting one of the quarterly programs. These are all ways people can get, involved, and every little bit of support helps.
Okay. And so one last question before we get into our fun questions. I wanted to ask you if there's anything else that we haven't discussed that you would like to mention about ALIM.
Is there anything else? It's difficult for me to overemphasize the importance of the work that ALIM is doing. And I think that it's unique. I don't think that there's any organization that is doing what ALIM is doing as well as ALIM is doing it and has been doing it. It's important to note that ALIM is not a startup. ALIM has a strong operational history, and there are many people that would be willing to give testimony to the impact that ALIM has had on their lives and perhaps even the lives of other members of their community. So support ALIM. Me personally, I wouldn't be involved with anything I thought was whack, anything I thought was a waste of time. I wouldn't involve myself. So my personal integrity on the line. I'm involved with this organization because I think the work that they're doing is, truly important. And if we get the kind of support that we aspire to get, I think ALIM can make a momentous, impact on the intellectual, cultural, and even spiritual landscape of American Muslims.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for sharing with us about ALIM, I want to transition. In all our interviews, we do a few fun questions.
Oh, mashallah.
And
I hope I find them fun.
So the first one is, who is your Muslim hero, if you have one, and why?
My Muslim hero. I have many Muslim heroes. I have many Muslim. Obviously Malcolm X is a Muslim hero of mine. It was actually reading his autobiography when I was in high school. I think I was maybe even in middle school. It was one of the first books that I read from cover to cover, and I was just absolutely taken by this story of transformation, and also his deep sincerity touched me. Because even then, I knew you didn't have to know about historiography to know that autobiographical writing is in many instances the least reliable form of historical account. Mm-hmm. If I write an autobiography, it's probably going to begin with how I was the coolest guy in Chicago. You know what I'm saying? It's my story. But there was something about Malcolm X's autobiography that it just seemed very, of course, he was still advocating very strongly for the causes that he felt passionately about, but it seemed very real. Mm-hmm. And he just seemed very genuine as a person. And that is a quality that I've always wanted to emulate. My other, Muslim hero, and this is no lie, I'm not saying this because I'm talking to you, is actually Dr. Sherman Jackson. A person that, I was able to really relate to, at a key and very pivotal time in my life, where I was trying to figure out certain core things about where I was going as a Muslim, and just seeing his example made a lot clear for me. Just not exactly what I want to be, but that there's a lot of room and potential to be myself and be someone that's serious about the study of Islam. Mm-hmm. And, and he was really just doing his thing. But for me, it was liberating to see somebody doing his thing like he was doing his thing. And I needed to see that at that time. You know what? He's doing his thing. I think I'm going to do my thing, man. I'm getting ready to do my thing. You know what I'm saying? And I can still be very rigorous and very devoted. And I saw those qualities reflected in him very, very prominently, along with just a comfortability with who he was and, what he brought to the table as a scholar. And, shout out to Dr. Jackson, man. That meant a lot to me, man. Straight up.
Alhamdulillah. Mm-hmm. So my next question is, what is your favorite concept in Islam and why?
My favorite concept in what?
Your favorite concept in Islam and why?
My favorite concept in Islam. My favorite concept in Islam. Wow. I guess I would have to say ihsan, but that's such a cliche. I'm sure everybody says ihsan. I should just shock everybody and say qawamatul rijal ala nisa. What? So men being the maintainers and caretakers of women or something like that. But that would make everybody dislike me. But ihsan is deeply inspirational for me, because the idea of worshiping Allah as though you can see Allah, it inspires me, because I think if I could see Allah, would I simply just be awe-inspired, and just stuck? Or would it actually prompt me to go out and do things in a way that I thought would please him? And I think that the community understands ihsan to be the latter, but we often talk about taqwa and things like that as though it were the former. That I have taqwa, therefore I don't do. I have taqwa, therefore I restrain from. But what about this idea of ihsan, or making beautiful, or worshiping Allah as though you could see him, being an engine to actually make life God-pleasing? And I think that, I struggle with that. And in that way, ihsan, I think, is hugely inspiring for me.
And so lastly, what is your favorite word and why?
My favorite word? It's, I guess I should say Allah. I guess I should say Allah. But actually, I get a lot of, I don't know. I don't know. It's just in terms of just elocution, just speaking. I really like saying the word Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I just, I think Sheikh Hamza Yusuf said once that just saying his name brings a certain kind of tranquility. I experienced that. I just like, I like the word Muhammad. It feels good to me. It has, even the word itself has a certain kind of completeness. And none of my children are named Muhammad. I only have two. I have a boy and a girl, which is kind of like, somebody might pull my card. If I say, one of my favorite words is Muhammad, okay, well, why is your son not named Muhammad? Well, my son's actually named Najashi Malcolm. But I don't know, I really, Muhammad. I would have to say Muhammad is my favorite word. My wife's last name is Muhammad, though. So maybe that gives me some points.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing with us about the ALIM program. And I just want to let people know that if they are interested in learning more about ALIM, they can do so at www.alimprogram.org. Thank you again. And this concludes another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. We would appreciate any feedback, questions, concerns you have, and you can reach us at nafshealertherapy@gmail.com. That's NAFSHEALER therapy@gmail.com. Thank you.